This ranch has a lot of rolling hills, has a lot of wetlands, riparian areas.
Most people don't even know there's land like this in Colorado.
My grandfather, he had a policy of his grandsons. When we turned 13, he gave us a heifer calf out of his herd. We never bought cattle for this ranch. And as we sit here today, every female on this ranch and every female that's ever been on this ranch goes back to that one heifer calf that my grandfather gave me.
Cattle don't know whether it's Saturday or Sunday, the weekend. So every day you check on them and make sure that they have, adequate food supply and water.
Oh my gosh, if people could come and see our cattle, we care so deeply for all of our animals. We take care of them before we take care of ourselves. And we make sure that they have everything that they need.
On April 22nd of 2022, a high wind came up. We had red flag warning.
It caught us all a little off guard, but the wind was blowing so hard and fast that day. Our fire season is 13 months out of every year. You just are constantly worried about that. It's pre-fire and post-fire, and we've had fires before, but this was a devastating fire.
More than 9,000 acres destroyed and an unknown number of cattle lost after a fire tore through the May family ranch in the southeastern Colorado town of Lamar.
We had red flag warning. We knew we were going to have high wind that day. We were 40 miles away, and we got a call from one of our good neighbors, said, hey, there's a fire on the ranch. And you can imagine the panic that puts in you.
Well, I was the one that actually got the call. It was the worst scenario because it was 70-mile-an-hour winds, and it was coming from the southwest, and that's right where the fire started, going up through our calving grounds. It's truly, something that we've always feared, and with good reason.
This fire had started at our south end and was getting ready to go through the whole ranch. So I called Chano. He was horseback. He hadn't even seen the fire yet because they were moving away from it. He turned around, looked at it, he said, yep, there's a bad fire south of us. They loaded horses, headed down there, and by the time they got there, it was getting out of control. They started the process of just going in front of the fire, opening gates, breaking every fence they could to give the cattle escape routes.
I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what to do. I said, man, start getting things ready, make sure tires are right up. We're gonna go see if we can get a fire break started. Yeah, it just was a blur from there. It's just crazy how fast it went.
By the time we got to the fire, it had moved 1 mile. It had gone a mile already. Cattle were going everywhere, and we started trying to build fire lines. Well, the wind was so strong, we couldn't do anything. It just kept getting away from us. So then we moved from trying to stop the fire to try to save animals. We have all these people that just dropped everything, ran to our rescue. They started looking for things that needed done and did them. We literally had cattle coming off the peripheries out of the fire, and in those sets of cattle would be bunches of white-tailed deer, mule deer, wildlife of every kind. They're coming out of that together because they're trying to find safety. It's unbelievable. My daughter Holly works in Lamar. She had heard the same thing, sirens are all going off. She looked out there, knew it was close to her home. At her house, they have many horses. Holly's focus was getting out there and getting the horses out of the path of danger.
I grab grain buckets, halters, and I just take off out into the field. And the fire was right there.
And the wind was blowing.
The wind was blowing. Adrenaline. I got to the horses. They're scared. I couldn't get them. I finally had to turn around. And I see Chano, our hired hand, coming through on horseback, literally riding through the flames. And so I start hollering at him to get our horses pushed back up, and I'm running out of breath. I was scared to death.
Chano was horseback on a horse he's had for 5 years. He had to get off, open the gate. He had cattle right there with him. He didn't go fast. They were going to pile up in that corner and he couldn't have got to it. So he dropped his reins, he ran, opened the gate. By the time he turned around, came back to get mounted, the horse's saddle blanket was on fire. And before he could get to him, the horse had to leave. I mean, in a wild panic, he was on fire. He ran into the smoke in a panic. As anybody that's ever been in a fire with horses, you understand what I'm saying. The fire was coming so fast, the cattle got out. But Chano at that point was on foot with this fire raging at him. And he couldn't see, he couldn't breathe. The only thing he could do was stop and try to protect himself. All credit to our local volunteer fire department. I don't know how many individuals they had out here, but they had every piece of equipment, every person that could help them. And one of them saw this happen to Chano. When the smoke covered him, they couldn't see him anymore. They could not get to him.
When I came back down to the bridge and I saw Chano, I just started bawling, hugging him. I said, I thought you were gone. The fire engulfed him, and I guarantee that's when he got off his horse to open the gate. And I see Wes coming through with the tractor. Didn't think I was going to get to him. I was ready to collapse, just adrenaline and running. I was scared. I got in the tractor with him, and then I ended up in front of the flames the whole way through the ranch.
We got flames as close to this fence is to us. The heat is so hot, the windows, you can't touch them. I get up here south of what we call Stony Point. And at that point, Dallas is caught up with us in the payload. And he's down in places we've never taken a piece of equipment before because it's so soft. And we're coming up the south side of that, and he's plowing through fences because cattle have all pushed up. These cattle, you'd think, you know, this is a 1,500-pound animal, right? No, they'll just plow right through that fence. No, our cattle aren't that way. They'll sit there and they would not go through it. He's coming through it and he pushes through the fences. The cattle are just following him. Just the most amazing thing you'd ever seen. And they knew we're there to help.
I looked back and I saw all of these cattle, fresh babies, literally running for their life from 30-foot flames and terrible windy conditions with lots of fuel for the fire. It was absolutely sickening. But it was the moment when I realized, you know, I was not active in fighting the fire. I actually got emotional right then because it was so tough thinking about what might happen. And then I get to realize, well, there's Dad, and he's not out of it either yet. And so it's just really tough because I see all those cattle, those babies running for their life, cattle that I've cared about my whole life. And they're there coming up and running to us for help, and we're totally out of control. You know, it's nothing we can do.
I was gone. I hadn't been anywhere for 4 years. When the fire happened, I was out of town. So we came back that night. I didn't know what to expect. The next day, you know, the sun comes up and, I mean, it's like a war zone. We literally didn't know what to do. We had no fences, cattle are everywhere. And it was so heartbreaking to see that, and the cows are wanting to go somewhere, wanting to be somewhere. And they all wanted to go back to the pastures that they had been in. Well, there was no water, feed was burned up, the dirt was blowing as bad, the cows' eyes were so full of mud and it was miserable. But feeding the cows, giving them water, that's what got me through 2 weeks of the worst days of our life.
For probably 2 weeks after the fire, while the ash was still hanging in the air, we were calving. I mean, there were literally cows having calves when the fire hit. So we don't know how many baby calves we lost. We don't even want to think about it. But what was so heart-wrenching was days after the fire, cows that had lost babies in the fire, they were just scouring the entire burn area looking for their calves. So you'd see cows walking with what you thought was no purpose, walking across a hill, ashes kicking up behind her, looking for her calf. I mean, we didn't lose any family members, no human lives were lost. It's pretty hard, but time heals that.
You know, it's a huge relief to know that everybody is safe, and then you start hearing what close calls they had. You do just thank God that He's watching over us and protecting us.
When I was 13, my grandfather, my dad's dad, gave me a heifer calf. He didn't have a lot either. He had kept about 25 cows. They were very important to him. My dad knew how special it was, and he made sure over the ensuing years that I never had to sell that heifer or her offspring. The result of that is I eventually got several cows, several females, and when I got out of high school, we started raising registered Limousin cattle, which is a breed from France. Highly desirable, highly sought after at that time, and highly adapted to our environment. She's a ring-eyed black baldy. I see her to this day. So we started a program of artificial insemination. We started doing that with all of our Hereford Angus cross females. You do that 3 or 4 generations, all of a sudden you've gotten your cattle to the point you have 94% full-blood Limousin, which can be considered purebred.
We bring in new bloodlines through our bulls and herd sires, and that's why we keep our program good. But these cows are like family to me. That red cow with the white bag that was kind of looking up around us, I know her. Her number is D9. I know her mother, and I know her mother's mother. I have literally grown up with these cows, and I love them. I know it sounds so silly and people, but they're almost like, they're not pets. They're definitely working stock. But I care about them. I don't want to see them sick. I don't want to see them hurt. I don't want to see them have trouble. They're part of my life too. And yes, they are a means to make money, but we care about them and we give them the best life possible. We don't just look at them. There's several different ways that we could go out and capitalize a little bit to make a little bit more profit at the detriment of their quality of life, if you want to say that. But we don't do it, and most people don't. That's the ranching community, and people love their cows. Everybody has dogs, cats, birds, snakes, whatever, they're pets. This is a little bit different, but this concept is the same. We have an attachment to these animals and we want to take care of them. We've sold bulls and heifers for 45 years, and that's been kind of our main goal. And now we're a little bit disrupted because of the fire, but we're pivoting. We can still sell cattle for beef as commercial or whatever and get along just fine. Global animal protection or partnership, whichever it is, and it's GAP certified, and it's just for the humane treatment of animals to make sure that we are giving them the best life possible. Even though they may be sold for beef, that's their purpose. That's what God gave them to us for, was for food, them and many other animals. And we are to be good stewards of them, so we take the best care we can, but at the same time, everyone needs to eat. And beef is such a high quality protein that people need it. We have some programs like the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program that certifies this beef was raised on a ranch. We're part of that program like this that is operated in a way that it is friendly to wild birds and species that may be struggling, that we're not just going out there and grazing everything we can and destroying these nesting habitats and all this other habitat. We're actually operating in a way to be wildlife friendly and benefit multi-species, not just us, not just the cattle. We're working so everything works together.
We operate this ranch in a way that we do our very best to coexist with wildlife.
You may not think that it's a big decision, but it might have big effects. And that's how everything is. You have to think about, am I ready to graze this pasture? Are those calves ready to be weaned? Does that field of hay need to taken out of production even though it's been there for 30 years? Is it worth disturbing that soil and wrecking that ecosystem because it's just not profitable anymore? And those small decisions really do build up. I feel like it's a responsibility, whether it be with animals or soil or grasslands, that I need to be there and share my firsthand experience, because nobody in my situation wants to do that, but somebody has to do it, otherwise it doesn't get shared. So we have to be able to tell our story and tell it truthfully, represent ourselves firsthand, or it doesn't happen.
I do serve on some boards, so I get exposure to some of the social issues. There are a lot of misconceptions about what ranching and farming and agriculture does for the environment. All too often, ranchers and farmers are demonized for their practices, when in reality, the opposite is true. I think that word is getting out there to society, because somebody that's doing the things that we're trying to do, we provide a huge socio-economic benefit to everybody. These species that might be extirpated if somebody wasn't privately doing something about it, they're gone forever.
The carbon credit offset program is amazing to me, and who we sell our credits to, that's just unbelievable to me. We out here, just a small pinpoint in southeastern Colorado, can serve the world, doing nothing basically, just agreeing not to plow up our land, which we wouldn't anyway. It's a wonderful benefit.
For us, the carbon that's in these grasses will never be released, so this grass will not be plowed up in perpetuity. And that's the most important part of it. And also it helps people who don't have any way to be able to support carbon sequestration. And that's what I love about it, is it's privately funded. Anybody out there can go and purchase carbon credits for North American grassland and have an effect here in the United States. We don't want to release the carbon. We want to be able to sequester it, and it's good for the environment, it's good for our grasslands, it's just an all-around win for us. People always want to think of carbon sequestration and carbon release as the rainforests and forests and everywhere, South America. But the grasslands sequester as much carbon as anything. It's unbelievable when you start studying how much carbon can truly be stored here underneath our feet.
Everything we do, our farming operation, we use fossil fuels. Of course, we have to. We couldn't feed the world if we weren't doing that. We have to take all of our carbon footprint and calculate that, and then we subtract that from the credits that this ranch is producing. So we end up with a net amount of credits. Our operation is carbon neutral because we are offsetting all of our use against what we're sequestering here on this ranch. The balance that's left after that, we sell to people who are looking to purchase credits. This ranch would not have been kept in its native state if it would have been plowed up and farmed. It would have had a huge release of carbon. This ranch has stored carbon forever. It's never been released. Whoever your land trust is responsible to monitor that, and they do it perpetually, forever. So it's a big cost, and they take on a big responsibility. We are really fortunate. Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust is one of the major and one of the first land trusts in the nation that actually started working with working ranches to keep that as part of the condition. That's how we benefit the environment, and they monitor that. It's really interesting. The fire, we try to take something good out of it. What we found out was, I talk about biodiversity and have an abundance of species. And if God put a species of plants or animals here, I think they should be here. God put them here for a reason. So what we found out quickly after the fire went across a lot of our ranch where it had sand hills, really fragile sugar sand with sage that holds it as the structure. Ranchers are sustaining the environment, promoting wildlife, keeping all of these pristine places intact. And they're doing it while trying to provide for their families and while providing a much needed resource for all of society. You still benefit from it. You have extra resources because people are out here doing some of the things that you may not even take advantage of. but all of it is needed in complementary fashion to provide it for everybody.
We've worked our whole lives to see this grass and these lands stay the way they were designed. We don't want to see it plowed up or developed or anything else, because there aren't very many places that are just untouched natural grasslands, and there's fewer every single day. It's important to me specifically because it's my life and my work out here, everything, and I see the importance of it, because all around us, all over the U.S., they're just acres and acres every day, thousands of acres. They're just plowed up and they never come back. It's never the same after that. The environment, or the habitat then, and the animals change, the soil changes, the grasses, the species, it's all affected. And that's how we operate everything, is one small change doesn't have one small effect. It has multiple, they may be small, but multiple effects.
That quickly would turn this ranch into a place that had no biodiversity. It would be monolithic set of plants. All of the plants would adapt to that grazing and overgrazing, and some would thrive, some would go away. It would create an environment that wasn't friendly at all to biodiversity. What's important to us and our family is to keep that intact. A few years ago, Denver Botanical Gardens contacted us because on private land in eastern Colorado, they had a gaping hole in their research. They had only been able to do plant and botanical studies on public lands and on public right-of-ways such as roads. They came to the ranch and they identified and surveyed documented species of plants. When it was all said and done, something like 340 species of plants were documented. And of those 340 species of plants, 70 species of grass. Along with that, they actually found some species that had never been documented in this part of the state. So they took samples of those and put them in their herbarium. One major threat to places like this are invasive species, whether it be wildlife, imported animals, plants, invasive plants. They started reaching out to like-minded researchers and scientists, and they developed a protocol. They put all of these experts together, developed a protocol, and that's what we instituted to do our carbon offset program. In other words, we have to quantify numbers, we have to have quality, and we have to have assurance that this is permanent. So we all have a carbon footprint. But people who want to offset that and have carbon neutral, well, what do? They have to find somewhere where there is a program, and our ranch fits that niche.
We are very open to let anybody come on to the ranch and explore. The fossils are remarkable. There's, seashells that'll be like this or bigger, larger, and it's just so interesting. You see that, and the magnificent infrastructure, I guess, and the rock, and I'd like to say the trees. Unfortunately, the fire took those away, and they won't come back in our lifetime, but it was an amazing feature there with all of the big trees. We've had botanists from Denver Botanical, the whole charter school come out for an education session when we were releasing the ferrets. They did reports on it. We had 3 school bus loads of children come out and release black-footed ferrets on our ranch. They understand an endangered species, and it's just nice to see that and be able to provide an educational aspect of the ranch.
Most people don't realize the importance to all these different species, and this layover in their migration is extremely important, because by the time they go on to the next body of water that they can lay over and rest and feed, plus when they come back through this spring, all of these waterfowl know these spots, and that's where they come to. Where we're standing is kind of the center of one of the prairie dog colonies we have on the ranch. This particular colony has been here my entire life. There have been 2 times that I know of that it has what we call plagued out. The animals in it picked up sylvatic plague, and it basically wipes them out. That's happened twice. They do and have came back in and repopulated. But we have worked for 10 years to become eligible and qualified to do the black-footed ferret reintroduction. Black-footed ferret, as most people know, is the most endangered mammal in North America, has been thought to be extinct twice in our lifetime. They have been brought back from the brink of extinction, and they're priceless animals now because they have been brought back from that point. We now have the ability to have enough of them that they can be released into the wild and hopefully reattain their natural wild status. We have released 35, 20 the first year, 15 the second year, so there's a total of 35 have been released. You know, hopefully we're having some natural births out here. That's what our goal is. We're scheduled for another release this fall, so as long as we continue to keep our prairie dog colonies healthy and we can keep everything viable, hopefully we'll keep bringing ferrets in. Someday we'll get to the point that we're having new naturally propagate out here. That's our goal. Ash is now the new terrestrial biologist for this small part. He is in charge of monitoring a lot of bird species, the smaller wildlife, and works in conjunction with our area biologist. Luckily, Ash is able to be part of that. He was a wildlife officer and was able to get this biologist job.
The May Ranch got ferrets 2 years ago, I think was the first release, and there's probably 6 sites in Colorado that have wild ferrets. Conservation easements are critical right now. You're already kind of stewards of the wildlife and stewards of the land, and a conservation easement just makes it so we can preserve these intact landscapes. We're losing habitat at such a fast pace, and this ranch isn't huge, but it's big enough that the integrity of this landscape will be locked in forever. The working landscape, it's just kind of a different feel because you're working day and night and it can get kind of hard, but then every once in a while you get to like sit back and think like, well, I get to live in this beautiful place and work in an office space, you know, created by God.
Our number one job is to be here and protect this, because the animals who are out here, not just the ferrets, every other animal doesn't have a voice for this, but we do have. So we take it as our mission that it's our job to protect this. And I don't know, it's a challenge, but that's where we're at today.
People like the Mays, those are the people that are doing the hard work on the ground. We really value the fact that, you know, not only is it this generation, but it's Riley's generation and the generations that follow him that are going to be a part of that ranch. It's a legacy for all of us, and the fact that we can be a piece of helping to support the hard work that they do is super important. One of the big things that they produce is really great people, and Riley is one of those people. I'm sorry, but you start talking about land and people and the emotions come out. But I just wanted to say kudos to them for doing all the great things that they do out there in a part of the world that doesn't get recognized a lot.
We are a ranch family, we are a farm family, and we are a farm and ranch family. You try to split things up, and for us, I know there's a lot of people that are kind of one or the other. For us, we're 100% both.
We've all probably been on every acre of that ranch. My husband and I used to leave here at 3 o'clock in the morning and start feeding, and the boys would take care of cattle that we had around here. It's just evolved into a big family thing.
Farming and ranching is not a lucrative business. It just isn't. It's a way of life. It's a good way of life. We love the animals, we love the land, and you just do the best with the resources that you have. We just try to move forward and do the best we can with whatever presents itself. When Dallas was in high school, it was just a single family. His mom and dad had the farm where they live, and then Dallas's grandmother had the farm where we live. It was a quarter section, 160 acres on each place, and they also rented one or leased another farm. That was enough to sustain their family, but as Dallas and I got married, and his sister got married, and his brother got married, it wasn't enough to sustain 4 families. So we expanded. We had the opportunity to buy an additional farm. And in the meantime, we're constantly seeking pasture for our cattle, and that helped to sustain our families. Each one of our kids have purchased a farm through the Beginning Farmers Program. We have kind of an unwritten agreement that they can use our equipment and in return for labor. So everybody works together. Like I said, it's not a lucrative business. Dallas said, don't think you're going to get rich with a farm, and it's going to be difficult to make the payments some years, but every time you make a land payment, that's your retirement, and land appreciates.
Something I always get a kick out of saying is we like to have farming and cattle, so we make sure we never have any money.
The riches to us are not financial. The riches to us are keeping this intact and having a place that somebody can come to and see the eastern black rail, see the black-footed ferrets, see burrowing owls in the prairie dog colonies, go to the creek and the wetlands and see some of the fish that are in there. My family, what we get out of doing that and why it's important to us is because so much of that is disappearing. I want my grandkids and their grandkids, and if we don't end up on this ranch, somebody else's grandkids to be able to have the opportunity to have this as it was.
Knowing that it's going to be there for our children and our grandchildren, how wonderful is that to be able to carry forward a legacy? Dallas and Bon and I have been living this life from the time we were born, and to know that we can have that for our kids and their kids, to not have to go to a city and try and make a living in a city and try to grow a family when you can live out here and have your family out here. I know that the dad is just up there watching us every day. Dad would be so proud of everything that has been done since he's been gone.
It means so much to me. We get to watch our kids grow up being happy and really learning, get first world experience that a lot of kids don't get.
Riding the tractor, riding the chopper, riding the feed truck, ride horses. I mean, they have the dream life for little boys, and they get to experience it every day.
My boys, they can do whatever they want to. They may not want to do this. I hope that they do, because I think it's a fantastic way to live. But I don't see them doing anything else because they already love it. They see it now too as young boys, that there's some hard days and some long hours and things like that, and they see that I don't get to be home with them a lot as some of their friends, and other families that they see, and it's like, Daddy, why don't you get to come home when the sun's still up? He asked me that one day, why don't you come home when the sun's still up like this guy does? And I said, that's not how it works for us. It's kind of sad, because I'd love to do that too and have more of that at-home family lifestyle, spend time, because it's such precious time with these guys where they're small. But I also know that hopefully someday they'll be kind of in the same situation, and they'll get to appreciate not only what my dad and his dad and all the generations before sacrificed, but also what I did for them, and they'll see the benefit of it and why we did it. Because it's not like it's good to say, well, we did it because we were working. Well, that's not it. It's the greater good that we're working towards, that hopefully they'll see that the same way I do. We're so blessed because we have a great life, and it's because we have my sisters and their families here right by us, my parents, my grandmas, it's my aunts, uncles, everyone. It's really great.
I went to a small country school, so I think I've always known that our lifestyle is special. Instead of going to preschool, I spent time with my grandparents, or would go with my dad in the feed truck. I got all of those experiences from an early age. A lot of the kids I went to school with did grow up on farms. Some didn't, but I don't think it was evident to me until probably middle school when I went to town to school. What's really special to me is now that my kids are getting to do the same things I did at the same places I did.
We were really close as a family. We got to go with Dad. Especially Riley and I went with Dad every day. We were with him all the time, feeding cows and in the tractor. Spent a lot of time in the tractor.
Our parents would get us out of school and come straight to the farm, the ranch, and do whatever they were doing.
I used to get out of school to help move cows.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a bribe because I did pretty well in school. And so I can remember one specific time Riley didn't get to get out and I did. He was so mad.
I'm a spiritual guy, but I love to see the world around me, and I love to see God's hand in everything that I do. Driving around our country roads here, you know, looking at things that have been here my whole life and they're going to be here for generations after me. I love that because it makes me a part of something greater than I will ever be on my own.
My husband was such a hard worker, and he always told us if we just stayed together, worked together, it would all be okay. And I know he's looking down on us. And I have faith in my family that my great-grandchildren will carry on just like we have. There will be struggles because we still struggle. But I have the faith that they will carry on.